I am ready.
Awesome sauces all for my body. Hello, my darlings. This is Madam Tilly, and these are my boobs. And these are my friends. Yeah, Bud Bear.
You turned me into a marketable plushie, Tilly.
Ribbity Star.
The Fitness Gram Pacer test is a multi-stage aerobic capacity test.
So are my boobs. And Shion.
Hi everyone. Hi, it's me. I'm Shannon. It's lovely to be here with everybody.
Good to see y'all again. It's give everyone a hug. It's been like a year since we got to do this. Oh man. Oh man. So yeah.
It has.
I don't think I've ever
too
been on one of your
long.
podcasts before. Actually, I think I've only ever appeared live on stream with you. We did a collab for I think it was Streets of Rage 4, right?
Well, Streets of Rage 4. I know we've appeared in you appeared a couple of stuff in some random streams, and I know we planned podcasts, but this never came through. We went to do something Sonic related for a while. But today we're talking about the 5th generation of consoles. As we've been kind of going through the gens. Last time we talked about the first 4 gens. So the Sega Genesis, the Super Nintendo. And today, this is the 5th generation. Now we'll deep dive on the individual libraries next time around. But yeah, so it's like trying to think my first 5th gen console, PlayStation was just coming out. It was like the early mid 90s. I was just playing the Sega CD for like 4 years.
Nice.
Then N64 dropped in, and I'm not sure what to think of like the new 3D fancy graphics, but I remember getting a 64 for a couple years, and that was my jam for a bit. And then I just saw Final Fantasy 7 and 8, and just eventually just jumped ship to the PS1 and play, and that kind of being my main console. Didn't really own a Sega Saturn at the time.
I mean, who did? That was part of the problem.
Yeah. And then we'll get into the handhelds in a bit. But yeah, so what's y'all's over impressions of the 5th generation?
Well, it's pretty special to me because my first ever games console was a PlayStation 1. It was the original big grey box versions, and I got it in the 2000s while the PS2 was already a thing. Like, I had friends who had PS2s and stuff. And, we weren't a very well-off family. But anyway, one day my dad comes home with a PS1 and a copy of the game of the movie of Casper the Friendly Ghost, which was not a 3D game.
That was that weird adventure game one, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I remember my memories of the game are mostly getting stuck at the first objective, finding the cheat codes that let you actually go up and over the walls, and getting all of the items in the developer room and exploring the mansion, like out of sequence.
Yeah, I was like enchanted by that game as a kid for a month before realizing it was bad.
Yeah.
I feel that.
I never got to that point because I was never able to experience the game as it was supposed to be experienced because I was too dumb.
Oh man.
But yeah, my library of games mostly was made up of the demo discs that you get with magazines.
Yep.
So I experienced a very small slice of many games.
Nice.
So my PS1 rabbit hole was Armored Core.
Impressive.
First Armored Core came out in like 1997. I got it 1998. I was like 9 years old. And by 2001, I was popping fucking Armored Core Master of Arena into my PS2. And then Armored Core 2, which was one of the launch titles. And everyone was looking at me like I was insane because I was playing these weird idiosyncratic mech games with the awkward controls instead of like, God, what was popular on the PS2 for like, I don't know. But it took me a while as a weird autistic little bear to get into anything normal on a console, especially the PS1. But once I'd played Armored Core back to front and front to back, then RPGs happened. I I really want to say that the PS1 wins the entire era just because of RPGs.
Yes.
Because
Which
there's
is such,
like,
it's
go ahead.
it's such a shame because I didn't get to experience any PS1 RPGs until my until like my mid-teens through emulation.
I kind of wish that had
Because
been the case for me, honestly.
mhm,
Because there's a lot of them.
my game collection was so sporadic. I had like a Dance Revolution style game with a dance mat, and I had like the X-Men Tekken ripoff, like X2 Mutant Academy,
Sorry,
and
good
your
stuff.
DDR style game didn't happen to be Dancing Stage, did it?
it might have been.
Was it Dancing Stage Euromix specifically?
It may have. Yes, I think so.
Right, so the first song in the selection menu was, I think, Boyzone or something like that. If
Well,
that's
the
the
only
one.
song I remember from it was "You and Me, Baby, We Nothing But Mammals, so
Oh, Discovery
let's do it like
Okay,
we
so
do on the Discovery
that,
Channel."
I don't think that was in Euromix.
Mhm.
So it might have been one of the later ones, but the one that I had was
Ah.
Euromix, and it had stuff like Boyzone and Steps and that sort of thing. So Dancing Stage was actually the European localized name of Dance Dance Revolution at the time. So there's a chance
Oh,
it might have been an actual DDR game. However, there was another PS1 dance mat style game released specifically in Europe. I think it was called Dance UK. I will look that up now, but keep going.
yeah, this was definitely Dancing Stage because I remember the
Right.
cadence they said it with Dancing Stage.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so it was a dancing stage game. So Dance UK was a completely different game, which was, I'm going to generously call it a DDR-like, because I guess that's the modern way of categorizing genres and subgenres and stuff. Is you just suffix like onto the end of
Souls-like.
the end of whatever it is.
Yeah, it's descriptive.
Yeah, like so my PS1 experience. So like first off, I think between this and the Sega CD, I just kind of grew up on FMV games. So because
FMV games, wow.
yeah, because I didn't really
Nice.
unless you were playing like computer back in the early '90s, you know. This is how you experience was like live action cutscenes and yeah, I also got the demo disc, but in America we also got it with pizza delivery, and yeah,
What?
yeah. Um, and with
Awesome.
the PS1, I remember I had to play it in my parents' room because at the time uh this was our TVs were so old they didn't even have the red, white, and yellow cord
Or the
jacks.
RCA inputs, right?
RCA inputs. So yeah, it had those little screw-in ones. Um, so
Wow.
my dad had to eventually buy an adapter so I could put it in my room and get the fuck out of his room. Um, so I was just playing in his room for the whole time for about a month. And also didn't have a memory card at all. So I was basically playing the first 4
Yeah.
hours of Final Fantasy 7 over and over and over again. Like yeah, like one day I'll find out what's beyond Midgar. It's just um
Amazing.
let's see.
You were getting the Final Fantasy VII remake experience back in the day.
But yeah,
Nice. Oh yeah, yeah,
yeah.
literally. It does sort of like feel almost as if because game demos were so generous back then. Like you got the first
Mhm.
third of Doom as shareware, and like especially with like PC and MS-DOS games and that kind
Yeah.
of thing, you would get a huge chunk of the game just like as part of the shareware demo. So I guess everything up until the end of Midgar could easily have been just a really extended demo of Final Fantasy VII. And I was going to
Yeah.
say, well, that would have helped it sell even more copies than it did, but that's like probably not really possible because it was kind of one of the best-selling PS1 games and one of the most like revolutionary,
Yeah.
cool, and technologically groundbreaking. Now, my history with the 5th generation specifically kind of occurs a little bit in retrospect. My first console was the Dreamcast.
Mhm.
And so I got one of those in the year 2000. I think it must have been while the Dreamcast was the newest console on the market before the PlayStation 2 came out. And so I got my first kind of taste of video games with this cool new cutting edge system. But most people that I knew, most of my friends, in fact, actually all of my friends who had video game consoles had the original PlayStation 1. And so I had a friend who used to live with me at the time, and her stepdad was like a really big gamer because he wasn't actually that much older than well, I was going to say not that much older than me. He's in his late 40s now, but her mother is in her like early 60s. So he was kind of like halfway between how old we were at the time and how old
Mhm.
mum was. And so he actually grew up like in the 80s with British home computers like, you know, the ZX Spectrum and Amstrad and that sort of thing, and later kind of graduated to consoles. So the ones that were popular in the UK were 4th generation, Mega Drive, and 5th generation was really heavily dominated by the PS1. So I played a lot of early PS1 games. Now, the controller that I had at the time for it was the classic D-pad controller without the analog sticks. And I always found that it was more comfortable to hold that way. I've never really liked the idea of having symmetrical analog sticks. And having grown up with Dreamcast's analog stick, which was a Hall effect sensor, going back to like a spring-loaded like potentiometer analog stick always felt kind of like loose and a little bit funky and weird to me.
Can I make a
So I used
recommendation?
to play D-pad based PS1 games whenever I could. So there were games like Mr. Driller, Worms, the original Rayman, specifically the original Rayman. I think that was actually a launch title for the PS1 here in the UK, but I'm not entirely sure. I had games like let's see, the aforementioned Dance UK. That was one of my older sister-in-law's games that she had. And for classic 3D platformers of the first kind of big mainstream boom of 3D platformers, Spyro and Croc. My favorite PS1
Oh,
game to this day is probably the original Spyro. Um,
I love the original Spyro, but again, I didn't encounter original Spyro until a few years ago on a friend's PS Vita.
Oh wow. But we were
Can I,
saying,
can I make a gamepad recommendation?
oh, go on.
oh yeah.
I swear I'm not like plugging this. I'm not sponsored. God, I wish I was sponsored by 8-Bit Dough. But 8-Bit Dough gamepads, like
Yeah.
regardless of their source, you or like what console they're mimicking, they use Hall effect joysticks.
Yep.
And I really wish I had gotten to experience the Dreamcast other than Shenmue when it was new.
Right.
But emulating the Dreamcast on my 8-Bit Dough pad is a joy.
It is. I
I
have an 8-bit Dough Ultimate 2C, and it does
I've
have
I've
the
looked
effect
into them.
sensors.
I was looking into 8-Bit Dough stuff, but it's a bit out of my price range.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
the quarter ones are only like $40. But
The Ultimate 2C, the Ultimate 2C wireless, which is the one that I have, is
Mhm.
$26.99 on Amazon right now.
yeah, definitely
I
go off
got
Amazon, not the website.
I got a wired, like with an interchangeable USB Type C cord Xbox One pad from 8-Bit Dough for $20 on Amazon.
Oh, I remember why I thought they were expensive. I was specifically trying to get a hold of one with pressure sensitive face buttons
Yeah,
Oh,
that'll do it.
for playing the Metal Gear games.
Hmm.
for PS2
Yeah,
emulation,
Yeah.
presumably,
Speaking of
right?
Metal Gear and
Yeah.
gamepads, one I should not recommend, Mad Cats. Specifically the memory cards, Because also,
Mm-hmm.
I got a Mad Catz memory card, and it had a virus in it. And
Wow.
it killed
Wow,
both.
what the fuck?
Yeah, it killed both my controller ports. So all I could do is just pop in a PS1 disc and just watch the opening
That's
cutscenes. Yeah,
that's astonishing.
yeah. So just
Whoa.
watch the original Metal Gear, like,
You know,
and then in the submarine, and then that's basically all I could do. And so I literally, thank goodness I had good grades on my report card, so I got me another PS1. Yeah.
Damn, that sucks.
Right.
I have one more point about gamepads.
Yeet.
So I also Shinon, I had a PS1 with the original controllers that did not have joysticks.
Yeah.
And I didn't find out that you could get ones with joysticks. Like I didn't see them in person. Like I found out they existed this way, but I didn't see them in person until like 7 years ago.
Right.
But yeah, so as a child with my PS1, I had a demo that I kept trying to play. Like, that I played quite a lot. I put like a surprising amount of hours into Ape Escape.
Nice.
Right, I see. Yeah, I was going to guess that it was
it's-
Ape Escape because that's the one that's like the
the-
poster
the
child for the analog controller.
Yeah, the Ape Escape demo has you running around a testing area, like learning how to use all the gadgets, and you can only progress so far because, all the gadgets rely on the analog sticks.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the actual, if you get an actual retail copy of Ape Escape, it has like warnings all over the front and the back saying it only supports the analog controller specifically. It has
Yeah.
it in like big bold letters on the front and back with a picture of the analog controller saying designed for this, only works with this. Don't buy it if you don't have this. And I'm assuming that the demo did not afford you the same warning.
No.
Right.
Also,
No.
just a random
Oh.
note here. Like, is Final Fantasy having like some kind of big boom right now? Because I see on like my friends'
Yeah.
list right now, one's playing FF7, there's an FF8, FF16, FF7 remake. Like everyone's playing a different Final Fantasy game right now. Like, what's going on?
Final Fantasy's having a renaissance lately,
Yeah.
and it's mostly really because of the 7 remake trilogy.
Yeah. I have 3 words for you. Steam summer sale.
Yes, I got the 7 remake part 1 and 2 twin pack in the summer sale. Like, this is the second time I've bought 7 remake. I also have it on the PS4.
see,
In fact, I just finished going through the entire story again today.
Oh man, I remember a couple of years ago, remake kind of pissed me off, or mostly Square Enix, because I'm like, okay, remake and Yakuza 7 Like a Dragon came out same year, and Dragon's now $20, and remake's still $60. Like, what kind of greed is this shit? Yes. Oh, but
Ooh, should have gotten the Steam Summer Sale, baby. It was remake part 1 and 2, so remake and rebirth
yeah.
for £25 together.
That's the thing. I didn't think people were gonna be that hyped for it, because I figured like, okay, we were expecting this, whatever, let's just get it, I didn't think people were actually really hyped, because the direct reception to Rebirth was pretty milquetoast,
Yeah.
so
Well, I feel like anything that exists in the middle of a trilogy is gonna suffer a bit.
Yeah. Oh, what's that, bud?
so here's a question for the whole generation of the whole 5th generation of consoles.
Yes.
What's the
Go on,
worst
Andrew.
game in this generation you've played?
Ooh.
The worst. Oh, the worst. Oh, I'm so glad you said that we've played, because thinking of the worst game of this generation, there was some absolute like straight dog water movie tie-in adaptations, like video game adaptations of popular films, kids TV shows, franchises, and that sort of thing. That was more of a problem in the early to mid 2000s. Although, because the PS1 was still around then, it got some real serious shovelware but that I've
Yes.
played. I would
Mhm.
need to think on it actually. So someone else can take this one first, I think.
Yeah, 'cause normally when I have a bad game, I tend to block it out of my memory. Um,
Yeah.
uh,
Nearly all the games that I owned throughout the 5th and 6th generation were movie tie-in games. So
So sorry.
yeah,
So
I remember genuinely really enjoying and being fascinated by the dinosaur game, like of the movie Dinosaur, and I regularly see that on lists of like the worst games ever.
Now,
so
I'm not going to say that it's the worst 5th gen game that I've ever played, but now that you've reminded me of the fact that the fact of its existence, I'm having. I'll be so real with you, Remedy. I am struggling to think of one that I enjoyed less. I I really don't want to do that to you because you just brought it up. I'd forgotten that it was a thing. There must be
No,
something
I bet if I played it again now, I would hate it. But like, it was something about the atmosphere enraptured me as a small child.
Let me
so
do some googling. You guys go first.
what's up, bud?
I can name a worst game I've played from multiple consoles.
Oh boy,
Sega 32X counts as 5th generation, right, Tilly?
it does.
Motocross Mayhem. Uh, God, TurboGrafx 16. Uh, Keith Courage. No, wait. TurboGrafx 16 is 4th generation.
It is. I came up before the Mega Drive, actually, that one, so it's very 4th generation.
Okay, so this is going to be a controversial opinion, and it's entirely because I didn't mesh with the humor, but Conker's Bad Fur Day.
Yeah, do you know something? I don't like rareware games generally, and I really don't like their writing. And people have been trying to convince me for such a long time that Star Fox Adventures would have been a lot better if it had come out as Dinosaur Planet as originally intended. And often, what is cited as the reason for that is the kind of like mistreatment of Crystal as a
Yeah.
character and like the problems with the writing. I'm sorry to have to say this, but I do not have faith in that era of Rareware as a company to have been able to write that game well, even in its original form.
Crystal kind of gets redeemed in her treatment in later games, and
Yeah, Assault. She's great in Assault. I can't speak for Command because of the weird like alternate endings and stuff, but it just
Oh man.
it
Star Fox Command is like weirdly accurate to the comics that I feel like I'm the only person on Earth that read.
It does have some
Because
deep
like,
lore.
what?
It does have some pretty deep lore.
Yeah, but like I think my favorite bit of the comic lore that made it into Star Fox Command was Fox and Crystal breaking up because he's a fucking frigid skinflint.
that's fucking incredible.
Yeah.
Actually, that's insane.
Wow.
My favorite
Like,
ending was she Star Fox. I think he kicks her out of the team because he's just too worried for her safety. So she
and
breaks
yet
up with
she's
him.
canonic, and yet canonically she's a better pilot than him.
Yeah, she breaks up with him to join like Star Wolf, and even dates one of the Star Wolf members.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think eventually, then everyone in the galaxy just makes fun of her for calling her just like a, yeah, like a turncoat and shit. So she quits Star Wolf, and then it becomes a lone bounty hunter, and then becomes this edgy goth girl that Fox doesn't even recognize. That's time they pass each other in a spaceport.
See, a part of it is that
Nice.
in the comics, Star Wolf wasn't this comically evil, awful people team.
Yeah.
They were just rival mercenaries. Because people just kind of forget that Fox McCloud isn't a hero. He's a guy
He's a
who,
mercenary.
he's a mercenary. He's fighting
Yeah.
for a paycheck.
Yeah, and according to DeviantArt,
Honestly, that's one of the coolest things about the character. Actually, it's something that people like forget about so much, as you said. It's just like, and it's criminally underexplored because I genuinely think that Star Fox is one of the most underutilized universes that Nintendo has. You could like anthropomorphic space animals exploring the galaxy, and it's like super futuristic modern sci-fi technology. You could make virtually any game in any genre in that universe, telling the stories of things that happen in the different sort of military and paramilitary and rebel and mercenary factions and different character focuses and different, like you could do a tactics like Advanced Wars tactics style simulator battle simulator game with like the Cornerian army, for example. You can make a whole game out of that, a little bit like what is it? What's the game in the Tail Concerto series where it's like a tactical RPG with permadeath and they're furry characters?
I know which one you mean, but I forget its name.
Yeah,
But
I think it's called
like fucking
Melodies of Steel. Yeah, you could make a game like that in the Star Fox universe. For example, you could make vertically and horizontally scrolling shoot 'em ups would easily lend themselves into that genre.
Starlink Battle for Atlas shows us you could make a free roaming air, sky, space flight combat game. They're even fucking in that one.
Since we kind of are get into it, I guess let's go from the PS1 to the N64. So we all know the infamous.
I didn't have one.
Nintendo, tried to make a deal with Sony because you were just Sony Pictures at the time, and the things didn't work out. And Sony's like, you know what, we could do this, and so they just made their own fucking console, and now it's like dominating. Sometimes, but they definitely dominate the 5th generation. But so Nintendo wanted to stick with cartridges. But arguably their games are pretty high quality. They don't have a lot of like FMV scenes because there's not much storage on a cartridge apparently. But they did pretty good with what they had. And like I said, I first from like 96 to 98, the 64 was my main console, like the kind of the only Nintendo console I had in its heyday.
I have a very controversial opinion of the N64.
Oh, cool. Go for it.
I don't even think that it's just only the first-party games have held up.
Yeah.
There's only a handful of games on it that aren't first-party that I think were good.
I can see that.
I ended up getting a Nintendo 64 eventually at some point because I found one for a $5. Incredibly lucky find. And I bought GoldenEye for it. And that was the only game I had for it for a while. And it was really good. I finished the game, loved it. I really wanted, because I played it at a friend's house, and it captivated me, Turok 2 Seeds of Evil, specifically. Just the second one. And I've not played the first one. And I bought that, and I got grounded. And the Nintendo 64 went under my parents' bed. I was grounded for 2 weeks. When I got it back after those 2 weeks, it didn't work anymore. And I was crushed.
Oof.
Damn.
I will say Turok 2 is better than the first one. I would even say Turok 2 is one of the few games on the console I actually really liked.
Yeah, compared like PS1 got so much shovelware. But whereas the N64 only had like 2, maybe 300 games tops.
Like a big perception of shovelware on any console, even the Wii, honestly, tends to be because that console got mass support, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like
the easier something is to develop for, probably, the more shovelware you're going to get.
Well, the PS2 had a lot of shovelware, like a lot.
Yeah.
Which the PS2 was not easy to develop for because the emotion engine, as they called it, was just a hellish processor to work with, even if it could do great things. But it was still worth.
I knew the PS3 was difficult to develop for. I didn't know that about the PS2.
Yeah.
Even with the difficulty, though, the PS2 had mass adoption on an insane scale because it was also a DVD player.
Yeah.
So, and it was cheaper.
Mine could only play DVDs in green. The green color channel was the only thing that worked specifically for DVDs, and I don't know why.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't find out for so long because my favorite movie was The Matrix.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh that much.
Yeah.
But like,
so I was going to say that like the the PlayStation 2 had like an implementation of copy protection. If you would try and play it back on a TV with a built-in video recorder and try and record it, then the picture would immediately go crazy and screw up. I mean, the other thing, of course, is that Sony's implementation of component color on the PlayStation 2. This is a really weird esoteric fact, but they used a technique called sync on green, where the synchronization signal between the RGB channels was on the same line as the green channel. And so if you were running it through like a component display and not using RGB SCART, then sometimes it would show up green. But other than those two things, I can't really think of why that would have been for DVD specifically, because the copy protection stuff only kicks in when you play like a copy protected DVD on it.
Actually,
But I tried to
Interesting.
videotape a DVD that I was playing on the PlayStation 2 through like a TV that had like a built-in VHS recorder in it, and immediately when you press record, the picture goes absolutely berserk and crazy
nice. My uncle
because
actually
they
did
just
that.
go ahead. Sorry.
Wait, the PS3 plays games. I was a Blu-ray player.
Yeah, much like when I'm surprised about this when people tell me about the N64, the PS3 does have a game library. Um,
Oh, man.
sorry. So my
Go on.
little controversial take about the Nintendo 64. I know that it has fantastic revolutionary games on it, and there is stuff that is revered and classic, and for good reason as well, because they codified a lot of the trends and tropes and a lot of the research and experimentation that was done in making early 3D games. Like the N64 has a very small handful of games that are just 2D, especially sprite-based 2D. Like it has
Mhm.
Mischief Makers, Pokemon Puzzle League, and I really can't think of any others. Like, although
Wonder
there are not a
Project
lot
J,
of
maybe?
games on it has, yeah. And it has like a smaller game library than the Sega Saturn does, actually, which is kind of shocking. And it actually undersold the Saturn in Japan specifically. The Saturn outsold the N64, so it wasn't a massively popular console outside of like English speaking and Western regions. Um,
Mhm.
a lot of developers worked really, really hard on that system to try and work out how to make games in 3D. And it's not just like a case of, oh, we need to work out how the controls and camera and movement work. It's like, no, we need to get really good at writing code in like higher level programming languages. So instead of writing stuff in like assembly for the specific CPU you were working with, you were writing things in C. So it's like, okay, cool. You've learned how to make games with like 68,000 assembly. Now you're writing stuff in C, which is a completely different language. Get used to that, firstly. And secondly, you've got to get really good at a bunch of really complicated 3D maths to set up the like graphics and all of the perspective and transform and texture
Mhm.
mapping stuff. And it's like, this is a completely different way of making games and making content. Because you go from like, okay, even making assets. We have sprites, for instance, and I don't know whether or not you've ever seen any of the Sega Digitizer workstations, but it was basically you had an enormous touchscreen and a giant pen with a cable coming out the back of it, and it has a grid on screen, and you would tap the little squares in the grid to fill in pixels, and then you would like adjust color values for them. So it
Oh.
was like having a giant graphics tablet, effectively, in the form factor of a big CRT. Now that works for 2D graphics, might even work for texture authoring, but when it came time to develop like actual 3D games, you needed a workstation, a really
Yeah.
expensive workstation, probably that cost more than your salary, to be able to render and make and author the 3D models, and expensive software suites for them as well. So you were talking like the kind of workstations that had previously only been used for professional computer-aided design, like product design in the late 80s, and then in the early 90s, I guess like Hollywood was using them to render out special effects. Stuff like the Silicon Graphics workstations and things, and you would need those to create 3D objects, models, environments, and that kind of thing for use in 3D game consoles. So it was like a totally different development process. You take that difference and then combine that with the fact that, oh, all of the new game mechanics that appeared in, for example, Mario 64 that weren't in Mario World or even like Yoshi's Island, right? And all of the new game mechanics and new features that that they had to build into those games, and then think about the fact that they only had 2 years to learn how to do that and do it well enough to publish a finished, professional, high quality product, and then think about how good those games ended up.
Mhm.
That's really impressive. That is really impressive. That is an almost inhuman level of like engineering and art ingenuity there. So
Imagine
go ahead, sorry.
going through all that expense, all that blood, sweat, and tears, and finally finishing your game and putting it out to market, and then imagine it getting trashed for not being quite as pretty as something else that released just before you.
Oh man.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, imagine going to a trade show with Bubsy 3D in a late beta stage and seeing Mario 64 at that trade show.
Crushing.
I'm gonna be honest, even Croc and Crash Bandicoot, they must have felt a little bit like that seeing Mario 64.
Right.
But then, so go ahead.
Hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, that's it.
See, the thing is, that's actually what happened to Bubsy. But
Yeah.
Croc was just better thought out, and Crash Bandicoot was an entirely different style of platformer. But I say that to just like not downplay how influential games like Mario 64 or Ocarina of Time were when I say the N64 was the inferior port machine for the most part.
Yeah, I remember very vividly because one of the few games I had on the PS1 that I played all the way through and greatly enjoyed and was genuinely a good game was the first Spider-Man PS1 game, the 3D one. A lot of stuff in that would go on to inform the game of the first movie, which was basically just that same gameplay but ported to PS2. The N64 version of that game has all of the same gameplay, but all of the cutscenes are removed and replaced with images taken from the PS1 cutscenes and presented with text, like you're playing a Game Boy Advance port of
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, a lot of did that.
My favorite game that I shouldn't like that does that, which is why I like the PS1 version instead. Awful game, but I love it anyway. Mortal Kombat Mythologies Sub-Zero.
Oh,
I've seen footage of that, and it is always looked so interesting.
yeah. Yeah.
But with that, I have to leave you. Have a wonderful podcast. I am needed elsewhere.
It's good to see
Just
you,
remember,
darling. Don't be a
just
stranger.
remember,
Bye, everybody.
we regret nothing.
I
Wonderful to meet
regret
you, Remedy. Thank you so
nothing.
much for coming today.
Thank you, darling.
Have a
Thank you.
good time.
Bye.
Yeah, it's about like the design of 64. First off, you had the controller, which looks like a trident. And
Can I head you off at the pass and say something about the controller?
go for it.
The thing that people always say about the controller is, was this designed for an alien? We don't have 3 hands. But the moment you're actually playing a game, most games on the system don't allow input on the D-pad and the analog stick at the same time.
Yeah.
And they're also smart enough to put non-essential functions on the L button, like switching between camera modes, shit you wouldn't need to do on the fly.
Yeah.
So like it's not as alien as people think it is, even if it's still not great. It's just, uh suboptimal instead of completely banana pants insane.
Oddly enough, my N64 controller might have been a third party because it was one of those see-through ones, and it only had the middle spike part. The two sides were gone. It was just the one. Um, but yeah, played smoothly. Actually, too is like the console's design. Because I know it's like the PS1. And usually like all the PlayStations have at least two versions of their own console. And like the PS1, you had the old faithful gray top, and then you had a lot of people had the this mini looking white one. They can just fit in your purse. Yeah.
PS1, yeah. So the funny thing about that one is it's spelled PS1,
Yeah.
but the text of the number one, so PSONE,
Yeah.
because it came out as sort of like a budget companion system for if you can't afford a PlayStation 2, get the PS1 instead. And I actually had not one, but like a couple of those. They were so cheap and so commonly available in the UK that when I was at university, I went to a like an anime and gaming convention and stuff, and they had like a complete set of like PS1 controller games and everything that you would need to just plug it in and play it for about £10, 15, between 10 and £15. And I thought, well, that's my evening sorted. So even though I had one at my family home, and my grandparents had one as well. I thought, well, what harm is a third one, right? Because I can always just take the games around and the memory cards and stuff if I need to like move around and track my progress between units. So like, let's get a third one. But really, like that is a system that sold well enough that you could have a fleet of PlayStations distributed amongst your whole family and just like take your memory card from place to place. But yeah, no, go ahead. The design of the N64 specifically.
But I'll say the
what do you think
N64 is
about
probably the most sturdiest material I've ever seen. Because I've stepped on a PS1 and crushed it to the carpet. Whereas I seen a fucking whole fat TV fall on top of 64 and not even scratch it. Yeah,
I have a story about that.
go for it.
So I got my first N64 when it literally fell off the back of a truck.
Incredible. And it survived the fall as well, right?
Oh yeah, like the damn thing bounced in box, like closed with like the fucking Donkey Kong 64 version.
That's the legendary Nintendo durability there.
It like bounced 6 times, slid down a hill, landed at my feet, and my friend looks at me and says, "Yo, if that thing works, it was meant to be."
And so it was.
And we took it back to my house. My mom looked at me like, "Did you go into a store and steal that?" And like my friend and my 4 other friends are like, "No, look at the box. It fell off the truck and we just want to see if it works." So we plug it in, put in Donkey Kong 64, and we're slowly dying inside while the DK rap plays. And
yeah, I had a vastly smaller cringe tolerance as a kid than I do for that kind of thing now. Like I literally, whenever Sonic Underground was airing on TV and they got to the bits where they sing the songs, I would just like change the channel for a minute and a half.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I get that secondhand embarrassment, so it's
Yeah.
hard to cringe, yeah.
Meanwhile, I recently bought the entire like TMNT 1987 series at Walmart on DVD, and I'm just reveling in the stupid. But yeah, that was like my introduction to actually owning an N64.
Yeah, nice. It's a shame that because like emulations, because I like where I live there is a flea market where I can get any retro console I want. So I recently rebought I think a PS2 and a 360. And but yeah, it's like I kind of wish I could like go about and rebuild like N64 and GameCube collections, but this game collection's gotten so expensive. It's just so much easier to just emulate the whole collection.
Oh, definitely.
And so, of course, they'll be like, well, no shit, it's cheaper to emulate it. No, I mean, it's cheaper to actually buy a PC than to
Yep.
rebuy your collection on those consoles.
One of my
Yeah.
friends looked at me and he said, why'd you buy that little mini computer about my Raspberry Pi 4, like
Yeah.
during the height of the pandemic? And I'm like, that thing was $110 with a cooling block and with a bunch of accessories, 16 gigs of RAM, four core processor, ARM emulation station.
Yeah.
$110. And I pull up the price of the game I was emulating at the time. God. It wasn't even like a good, well-known game. It was Master System trash at this point. I don't even remember which game it was. But it was like $300 loose. And he was like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
in the post-COVID era, retro video game collecting became extortionate.
Uh-huh.
And I
It
think in
was
the big
before that.
problem... Sorry?
It was before that, and people had been blaming YouTubers for a long
Yeah.
time.
I agree.
Like, specifically Metal Jesus Rocks, but the
Yeah.
actual problem is if you look at the groups actually reselling retro games. And I got like ousted from the retro gaming community in Washington State over this. I pointed out, hey, you guys are blaming YouTubers, but you're actively colluding to drive up and normalize prices between each other to make a quick buck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because everyone in grandma sees us how much we appreciate them, so they feel like they can extort us. And because like probably one of my best buys ever was I found a copy of Silent Hill 2 on the original Xbox, complete pristine copy, at a pawn shop, and the old guy was like, "Old ass Xbox game, give it to you for $1." And the then the young late adult lady next to him was like on her phone, like, "Sir, that goes for $30 online." And so I'm sweating, And the guy goes, "Well, I said $1, so I'm gonna get to him for $1." It's like, oh man, yeah. So, unless it's old folks who don't know what the fuck games sell for, it's like, yeah, there ain't no retro collecting these days.
Right, yeah, no, exactly. I mean, like, I actually sold all of my old video game consoles and stuff. It was about like late 2020, early 2021. That was before there was an enormous like spike in the used like retro game price collectors market, specifically for the consoles that I was selling for. So, Dreamcast, PS1, Mega Drive. I had a DS. I had a GameCube and an original Xbox as well. And owing to, well, sort of extenuating circumstances that my finances required me to liquidate all of my possessions pretty quickly if I wanted to continue to be able to feed and house myself. So I ended up getting rid of all my game consoles, all my old video games and stuff. And I remember watching in horror on like retro video game used price tracking websites as immediately after I'd sold them, there was this enormous uptick. And I thought, God, if I'd have waited 6 months or a year to sell some of this stuff, then I would have doubled or if not tripled my my takings from it. But then if I'd have waited 6 months to a year to sell all of that stuff, I would have starved to death and probably been homeless. But it's one of the things that I say about like when people discuss video game preservation, for example, right? And they always say, "Oh, we've got to encourage manufacturers to create and produce and publish physical games." And I'm thinking physical games are not really the point because old video game consoles, the games that were published were physical, but effectively, years after they get discontinued, they become rare, they become collector's items, they become stores of value, and the kind of financial like markets and ecosystems for buying, selling, and price gouging used games are pretty robust and well developed now. And as well as that, old video game consoles, anything CD based, those disk drives are now hitting like 30 plus years old. and they are dying. And even like cartridge ports, capacitors on motherboards in old video game consoles need changing.
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing. True video game preservation is not keeping a game in a box as a collector's item and never playing it. That's preserving something in the sense of, like, I don't know, you would preserve a dead body in formaldehyde,
Yeah.
but you're never going to actually be able to talk to the person again, right? That's
Yeah.
the thing. Whereas emulation kind of reanimates the experience, and you can pass down the encoded knowledge and ideas and artistic intention that sort of distilled itself into like the physical product, but then in experiencing that, you unpack it back into um, like the message and ideas that went into the art to begin with. So to me, video game preservation is sort of about passing on an idea. It's kind of experiential rather than about like actually physically preserving a disc or a cartridge or a hunk of plastic with a couple circuit boards inside it, right? Because even if you preserve the consoles, what are you going to do? Like replace the disk drive with an ODE? You're going to solder in an HDMI port to the back of your Dreamcast or your PS1 so that you can actually plug it into a modern TV and use it correctly. You're going to replace the power supply board so that you can run it off like a USB Type-C connector and so that the capacitors don't blow. At what point is it just Ship of Theseus? It's a completely new system, but the idea of experiencing that game and that system's offerings and the conversation about how its limitations informed the design of the games and how much of that design is fundamentally dated and belongs in the past versus how much can we learn from and develop and take into the future. And I think that firstly, emulation with quality of life improvements, like modern ports and remasters, and modern indie games that specifically take inspiration from like fifth generation style design and video game paradigm, like gameplay paradigms and that sort of thing. They explore that, in my opinion, even better than the games at the time were able to, because they have the benefit of time, hindsight, and not being incumbent to a much larger company which has just spent 100 grand on a workstation and an expensive software package, right? Like there's less of a financial burden on developing like fifth gen style video games now. So I guess the example of that would be there's a fantastic game on Steam called Pseudo Regalia, which is a 3D platformer Metroidvania styled like an N64 game, but in my opinion, it is almost better than anything that I've experienced on a real N64. But you have to kind of like pay respect to the original ideas that birthed that kind of paradigm. If I can continue, and this won't take very long, one of the greatest tragedies of how gaming has developed and progressed over the years is in part due to our kind of conceptions of technological improvement. When the new version of Windows comes out, you upgrade because the previous version becomes incompatible and outdated. And I think part of the problem of video game development has been treating old consoles as if they are now incompatible and outdated. We never reached the technological limit of what was possible with 2D pixel art, sprite based game design, or at least not until it was completely replaced by early 3D like polygon based game design. Like 3D early 3D gameplay from the fifth generation is not an evolution of late fourth generation 2D game design so much as it is in part a replacement. So it's like we replaced old technological paradigms with new ones without fully exploring artistically what would be possible in the old paradigm. And now indie developers specifically are able to look back and think, wait a minute, we didn't perfect pixel art based video games. We just replaced them. So what if we go back and we try to perfect them?
Going back to what you said about aging hardware,
Yeah.
um, that's why I've been primarily a proponent for emulation for so long.
Oh yeah,
Like,
definitely.
I was on the emulation scene much earlier than I should have been. Like 2000 year 2000, I was like 10 or 11. And I was sitting on forums having arguments about usability versus accuracy in emulation, because we were already hitting that point in arguments about PS1 emulation, about how, you know, it doesn't matter how usable it is now because hardware is just getting better and better. And then like leading into the aging hardware, even the game storage medium itself is aging out of usability.
Right.
Like
Exactly.
game collectors and resellers kind of buried it, but a while back there was a, you know, mass disc rot problem.
Yep.
With PS1 games. And every time it would be brought up to a reseller, they would pull out one of those old ancient music CDs that were produced, music or CD-ROMs for PC that were produced in the very late 80s as a proof of concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. The painstakingly pressed ones that weren't super mass produced but with cheap materials show that it wasn't rotted at all, and like try to make disc rot itself out to be a myth. And that's why emulation is preservation, because the people who want to sell you this shit will talk about how emulation destroys the spirit of the experience, betrays retro gaming, actually. It's also piracy because you're not paying the original devs. It's like, am I paying the original devs anything by handing you $90 for a restored NES and $120 for a physical copy of Mario 3?
Exactly. It's a psyop by like greedy collectors to inflate the
Oh,
value of their investment. That's basically it.
yeah, and like they demonize YouTubers as the reason prices are going up too.
Yeah, it's like I remember one guy. It's like, oh, let me see how much that is. He just looks up on his phone. I'm like, dude, you're not supposed to go by that price. Yeah, because mostly, let's just, hey, maybe like add like 30% or basically how much it is and like minus 30% off what they're selling online. If you want to make a good sale, that's my sales advice. You know, if it's $100, it's sell for 70 or something. But
See,
yeah,
when I was reselling, because I didn't, they're meant to be played. I didn't have anything
Right.
to play.
Exactly.
yeah,
I would look at the price charting and I would undercut as low as I could while still making at least a little money.
yeah,
Like, because, like, say I got a really rare game for $5. Some guy is selling it for $150.
yeah.
I would legitimately swoop right in and go, hey, buddy, you can have mine for 15. Still making a profit. Someone's gonna fucking play it, you know?
Exactly.
Oh.
And a lot of collectors. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Now it's reminding me because I remember one of my favorite games of all time was the Misadventures of Tron Bond PS1, and saw a copy on eBay, and I'm like, give you 40. He's like, I ain't letting it go for less than 60. Fine, I get it. The disc has a freaking price tag for 20 on it. Motherfucker.
Jesus.
Right, yeah. No, that's ridiculous.
Speaking of preservation, though, and this is actually on topic of the 5th generation.
Yeah.
I'm sorry we always tend to go so far off topic, Tilly.
Oh, that's fine. So I had another pawn shop story.
But Chrono Cross is one of the biggest pariah games of the 5th generation.
Yeah.
And it was to the point where, you know, before DuckStation was a thing, the biggest emulator at the time, EPSXE would legitimately break emulation on Chrono Cross periodically just to own people who liked it.
Yeah.
Wow, that sucks.
And like the Misadventures of Tron Bond was completely unemulatable on EPSXE.
specifically because the lead developer was trying to sell his copy for $400.
Damn.
That's incredible.
That is an unsubstantiated rumor, but knowing the developers who worked on that specific emulator in passing when I was like 13, I'd believe it.
I see. I mean, the emulators that I've used for PS1, there was an emulator from a very long time ago just called PSX, and it was lowercase p, capital SX. Not a lot of people remember it, but when I had an old netbook back in the late 2000s, if anyone remembers netbooks, they were these sort of like tiny, ultra compact, ultra light,
Yeah.
like low budget machines that were basically just built for text document writing and web browsing, and that was
Yep.
really all they were capable of.
Yeah.
I used to see how far I could push those things with emulation. So PS1 games, every PS1 game I threw it was perfectly playable on PSX. I used to play Super Nintendo games with ZSNES, and I think at the time for Mega Drive emulation, I was alternating between Gens and Kega Fusion.
I'm still going.
But yeah, no, they were basically everything that I tried to play played back on that. However, I didn't get into JRPGs until I played the Steam port of Final Fantasy VII in like 2012.
Nice.
Fun fact on PSX: the primary RetroPie for Raspberry Pi emulator for PS1 games is PSX Rearmed.
Wow,
It's a still updated ARM port of PSX.
that's great.
Yeah.
That's fantastic, actually.
Like my story, and also pertains to Final Fantasy 7 PS1. There's this one retro store. I don't think they're around anymore. Called Hex or Hector's, and it was basically like this person's like looks like a hoarder, like this like or like a it was like a retro video game store, and like a freaking hurricane blew through it, and he just refused to clean up because there was just like this games that are just in piles, are just scattered on the floor, not organized at all. So you'd find like PS games mixing with the Xbox games. It literally was like someone just took a bunch of barrels of games and just dumped them all over the place. And I
I
was
kind of
just
love
like,
that vibe, though. I think that's awesome.
yeah, it's just like the see, he had so much treasure here. Like I will organize this all for you for free. You know, I was literally stepping on actual rare treasures. Like is this a fucking fully sealed copy of Super Mario RPG? Still in the plastic, everything. You know, like almost every like rare game you could think of, I literally found completely sealed and everything. This guy literally just had it on the floor, you know, for you just to kick with your shoe. Like what the fuck? Like Original
Grim.
Tomb Raider unopened. Yeah, it's like all the rare finds. And I literally I just picked up a broken laptop, and there was a complete black label non open copy of Final Fantasy VII, as well as the Final Fantasy Chronicles and anthologies and Legend of Mana. Just 4 Square Enix PS1 treasures, you know, just laying underneath a broken laptop in a junkyard, basically. And I grabbed those. I took those because that thing's a fucking, you know, that's a treasure for a lot of gamers. They love Black Label. And but yeah, we were talking about like memory cards. Fifth generation really birthed a memory card. They were technically around for the Sega CD, but we didn't really start using them until the 5th gen. Um, and
Right.
and it was kind of neat how like they would it would be the blocks, but it'd be like little cute arts, and you just bring it to your friends' houses and stuff. And yeah, spare a while back, I thought one of my YouTube projects was going to be exploring the hidden gems of the 5th and 6th generations, the ones that focused on memory cards, because when it comes to retro, everyone talks about like the Super Nintendo and you know the Sega Genesis and stuff. No one talks about that ugly 3D era, you know.
I think a lot of the ugly 3D era was memorable for the wrong reasons, and people just really don't want to talk about it as the thing.
Yeah, because you know, like people are just getting their feet wet with 3D animation. I think everyone like one of the bigger examples is Castlevania 64.
Yeah.
But like and it's kind of like that 2 generations ago. It's like where Nintendo, I criticize the NES all the time, because developers didn't know how to develop yet, because video games were just being born. They didn't know what quality of life meant. And then 16-bit was just a bit. It was better. And then the next gen was them start off with 3D.
Right.
And then after that, the 6th gen, it was better. And then we went to HD.
But there,
One
I
of the
think there have been sort of fundamental design problems with games in almost every generation, and like trends, specific trends that define the era. But what you were mentioning earlier about memory cards is actually very interesting. So I think that there were three big technological innovations that were typical of the 5th generation. Like the 5th generation is remembered for these, even though it didn't necessarily introduce all of them and they weren't universal.
Yeah.
And those big three are, as mentioned already, 3D, right? That's kind of the elephant in the room. The big polygonal, textured and vertex lit elephant in the room is the move to 3D, and all of the game design changes that necessitates. Things like camera programming, asset authoring, enemy behavior, player move set, controls needed changing to accommodate like a multi-axial movement and the larger move sets and more buttons that necessitated as well. The other two are CD-based storage media and memory cards. And memory cards are a really big one because up until that point, video game developers didn't know for sure at the start of development whether or not your game would be one that could have access to a storage medium for saving. So in the pre-PS1 era, specifically, most games were designed based on the idea that every single new playthrough, like when you would turn the power off, that would be resetting your progress to 0 and starting from the very beginning. And similarly, that's actually how arcade games tend to be designed as well. Like each new credit that you insert and each like run from the beginning of the game is like a totally new playthrough. The only thing that you bring from playthrough to playthrough is the development of your own skill. Now, memory cards kind of nullify that because you can save and you can load at the beginning of the level from where you left off without any kind of like without resetting from the beginning. And like video games started to be designed with the assumption that the person playing them would not only be able to do that, but that they would expect that would be a standard feature of design. And so in combination with the fact that CDs are a massively expanded storage media in comparison to the maximum storage offered by cartridges. Like if you think about the highest capacity Super Nintendo and Genesis games, they went up to maybe 32 to 40 megabytes. With a CD, you're looking at 650 right off the bat. And so that's not even just sort of like a 2 times or 3 times. That's an order of magnitude increase. And it also means that in order to fill up the additional space, let's face it, like not a lot of that storage space is taken up by the game code and texture files and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, well, we're going to bookend the game with high budget CGI cutscenes, and we can use the graphics rendering workstations that we had to buy in order to do the 3D modeling for the character models and environments in our game anyway. We're going to use them to render like really cool FMV intro cutscenes. Like the original Wipeout had like a cool FMV intro, right? And like even going up as late as the 6th generation with stuff like Sonic Adventure. And the original Rayman, for example, has sort of like this beautiful hand animated voiced cartoon intro sequence, but also CD quality audio and streamed music. You could have very large media files that were streamed in real time from the drive to the game, and then each stage was broken up by a loading screen. And that also informed game design. So a natural point of progression in a game is when you have to halt the player's progress temporarily and suspend gameplay to load the next part of the game into memory. That was also a good opportunity to save, firstly. But secondly, what it meant was that, like, previously, video game programmers were effectively treating the game's storage media as an extension of the console's RAM or like memory. So the only thing that you would need to store in RAM were the changes that you were making to what was already stored in the game ROM. So let's say you would have the level layout, object locations and stuff stored in the game ROM, and that's accessible by the console CPU at the same speed that the RAM is. So all you would need to store in the RAM is, okay, here's a list of objects that I've already collected that I'm just going to ignore from when I read the stage layout from the ROM memory and load from there, basically. Whereas on a CD, you don't actually have like real-time immediate access to every memory location on a CD all at once. It's like a linear read. So that's great for like linear streaming of like an audio track from the CD, but it's not so great when you need to like rapidly transition from one point of a level to the other or load in new like sprite or like character model or stage layout assets. So obviously, like in a loading screen, it loads everything it needs to either experience that particular part of the game. So that stage, the character models needed, some of the sound effects and stuff into like temporary RAM. So the RAM needed to be much bigger in the PS1 Saturn generation than it did in like the Super Nintendo Genesis generation. But also games needed to effectively be programmed in chunks. So it's like programming that is based on like loading large chunks of the game into memory rather than like having access to the whole cartridge at any point at once. Relying on like saving for game progression rather than restarting the game from like a cold boot every time. Expanded storage, so games could be longer, and streamed music and video assets because those are linear, so they're not limited by the CD only being able to be read in one place at once, right? So those big things like made as much of an impact on game design, in my opinion, at least, as the advent of 3D gaming did.
Can I take an aside about the origins of saving your game? Because I think it's actually really interesting.
Go ahead.
So the NES hit a soft launch in the West in general in New York in 1985, right? And then it hit the nationwide launch in the US in 1986 and then spread out to other English-speaking nations from there, right?
Yeah.
So the Famicom disk system was out before that.
Yeah.
And it basically, most games had a sometimes superfluous save system because you could just do that on a floppy disk.
Yeah.
And it was made because the Famicom had a huge problem with unlicensed games, and the Famicom disk system was proprietary. So moving games from the Famicom disk system to the NES, which was basically an unexpanded Famicom,
Yeah.
not only led to the development of the mapper chips that let you put bigger fucking games on the cartridges, they had to figure out a way to save them because passwords weren't going to work for something like Zelda, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy.
No, God.
So what they came up with, and why people will point to like, well, the original Legend of Zelda was $70 when it came out, was the most ingenious and idiotic system I've ever seen in my life. Genius for the time. In retrospect, many of the people who engineered it even said, what the hell were we thinking? Volatile RAM with minimal current running from essentially a watch battery to that RAM at such a low current that it would keep it alive, but such like you could replace the battery, not that anyone thought you would ever have to at the time, but it really was just a battery keeping some RAM powered just enough to keep the save inside it.
Right.
And like memory cards, like the PS1 memory card was a fucking revelation for me.
Yeah.
Because at the time, like I either had to painstakingly write out passwords, which meant I just wasn't going to play that game, screw this, or it was a crapshoot if the game I had was actually going to save.
Right.
Because I basically skipped the fourth generation on any official level. Like my grandma had at SNES, but I didn't. I had an NES in my room until I had a PS1 in my room.
Of course.
But like, if I was going to play games that needed to save, I was playing my mom's old DOS PC in my room.
Yes. That's a really good point, actually, because what I was talking about a moment ago with like games need to be loaded into RAM in chunks rather than just like uh, accessed directly through like the ROM cartridge as an extension of the console's memory. Um, that's kind of how PC gaming worked on like floppy disks and stuff. So like floppy disks, you would never like load completely in real time. Um, well, you would often just like install them to a hard drive basically, but then they would load the stage and all of the assets needed for it into RAM, and then that would be the part of the game that you would play through and sort of like wait between loading times and stuff. So like the idea of a disk load was a very sort of like home computer and PC concept before it kind of hit consoles when CDs became a thing. But I think there's an interesting comparison that you can make between, and I know that this is going away from like the fifth generation a little bit, but if you look at something like Sonic 2 on the Mega Drive versus something like Commander Keen on PC. So like Commander Keen, for people who don't know, was a 2D platformer series developed by id Software, and it was the last thing that they made before they did the early like raycasting 3D first-person shooters like Wolfenstein and Doom. So that game, it remembers object layouts on from one side of the stage to the other across these enormous open stages. Like the stages were like deep and wide and explorable. And you would be able to go collect different colored gems from different parts of the level and different rooms and like bring them to unlock doors. And you could explore different parts of the stage in sequence by unlocking different areas, hitting switches, opening doors, that kind of thing. If you collected an item or killed an enemy on the far opposite end of the stage, then it would still be dead in exactly the same place when you went back there later on. Whereas on the Mega Drive, you had these incredible parallax scrolling backgrounds and this amazing color depth and hardware accelerated sprites, and the game ran at like almost double the frame rate of PC games at the time. So a lot of them were locked to 35 hertz rather than 70, because a lot of PC monitors at the time ran at 70 hertz, so 50% of that would be 35, whereas the Genesis was intrinsically 60. But if you kill an enemy, then chances are when you scroll away from that area and then come back, that enemy is just going to respawn again because it's not something that was considered important enough for the console to remember in its limited RAM space. So Oh yeah, and also like Commander Keen, because obviously it was installed on your computer's hard drive from the floppy disk. You would copy it to the hard drive and load it from the hard drive. That hard drive also works as sort of like a scratch space that you can use to store up to 9 different save slots, and you can save and pause at any time during the game, and it effectively acts like an emulator save state does. It's insane. So you could actually completely subvert the need for checkpoints, because I don't think the game designers had sort of like understood the implications of letting the player choose exactly when they could save. So I never lose a life in Commander Keen because I'll always like save before a risky section. Then if I die, I'll just reload my save file, almost exactly like a save state in an emulator. But the way that PC games worked at the time was sort of like a weird kind of precursor to that. So I guess later they had to think, okay, how are we going to ration the save points so that there can be an actual difficulty curve in our game, and so not let the um, the dated aspects of arcade design and the novel aspects of arbitrary saving and loading conflict with each other too much. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a funny like kids you say it's like, what do you mean I have to manual save? It's
Yeah.
and recall back then too, like saving times was just took forever as well. I can recall so many games that took like over a minute for just to save the game. Let's load it. Like there's one game that was worse called Digimon World 3, which took 3 minutes just to save the game.
You know,
What?
Digimon World 3 is one of those games I've always wanted to like sit down and play,
Yeah.
but also, see, I love Digimon,
E-
the show,
Yeah.
but none of the games have ever felt like the show to me.
Gotcha. Yeah. I
E-
mean,
Even even like the low budget Digimon Adventure PSP tie-in game that got fan translated does not feel like the same experience as I have this one monster and he's my friend and he talks to me that Digimon did.
oh man. But let's move on to the Sega Saturn. Uh, could say a black sheep at the big one leagues here.
What?
I certainly didn't own one. I don't know anyone who owned one.
So I've never owned one, but I have delved into emulating the Sega Saturn.
Yes.
How'd that emulator setup I gave you work, by the way, Tilly?
It worked decent. It's an X here. If I want to, I'd have to redo it all over again because new PC woes. But
Yeah.
however, yeah, because yeah, that's one thing. For the Saturn, I actually did own one physically. Like later on, I hunted down an old school Gen 1 Sega CD, the same one I had back as a kid, and I bought the Saturn. The Saturn was actually cheaper at the time. I only paid $100 for it, but I never once got any games for it. Just because that was like the one of the most expensive consoles to ever collect for. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Sega CD and Sega Saturn didn't get mass produced like other consoles did.
yeah. And so not only is it was always a hard console to collect for, because yeah, cause those games were expensive before the sales boom.
Yeah.
But also it was just nearly impossible to emulate back then. Too. Like, 'cause I remember that and the Dreamcast were like so hard to get to emulate.
Meddefen has only really come as far as it is in the past couple of years.
I believe it.
Yeah,
And
Saturn emulation was pretty notorious for like a really long time as being quite
Yeah.
computationally intensive, and it's still actually more intensive than even some sixth generation games. I mean, we talk about the Dreamcast. In a way, it, like used to be difficult to emulate. The real turning point for that was
Redream.
okay, so I can get into like the technical reasons of the Dreamcast had this kind of special magic trick, I'm going to call it, where when drawing a scene, a 3D environment, it could run a depth probe, like a kind of pre-pass on the scene, to find out where polygons were like overlapping. So if it was overlapping and opaque, then it wouldn't render anything behind that polygon. But if it was transparent, it would keep going through until it hit another polygon, transparent again, keep going through. So it would be able to make a list in its memory almost and order the rendering correctly for all of the transparent polygons in the scene from background to foreground, and then automatically cull anything that would be rendered on the back face of an object that the viewport wouldn't be able to see. So the Dreamcast actually couldn't render that many polygons. It was pretty weak in terms of its sort of like raw power and throughput, but it had this incredible trick to make it dramatically more efficient than competing consoles at the time. Unfortunately, this trick, it's called order independent transparency, and like cutting the screen into in smaller tiles that were separate from each other and then probing them and rendering them all in parallel. That wasn't really possible on other GPUs outside of the Dreamcast until like around 2009 or so for order independent transparency. And then the tile based stuff wasn't really able to be emulated in hardware until I'm going to say around about 2013 or 2014. so it was kind of ahead of its time in a lot of ways, but sort of weak and anemic in others. But when like direct hardware alternatives for everything that the Dreamcast could do exclusively became commonplace on PC and other uh, like other platform architectures, then emulation of it became really trivial, because aside from that, it's actually a really, really simple design. The Saturn, on the other hand,
Yeah.
is kind of a monster.
Yeah, you actually brought back a flashback, because I remember a year ago I was doing that Resident Evil video. Cause I was comparing all the versions of RE1 from the PS1 to the Saturn, and the director's cuts and stuff. And I remember the Saturn had like 2 different video chips, which I guess made it hard to program for, and so there was like a layering thing. So if like transparent meshes just like was really obvious. Um, so like say like that one room in RE1 where with the little fountain with the tentacles, like just if you like walk behind the fountain, like the water spray just looked really different, like out of place. Or even like just like blood splatters on the floor. They would almost kind of like look like they're levitating off the ground a little bit, because like their transparent layering was a little difficult to program for with Saturn. But I wanted to ask Shinon, before you go further, how do you know all this hardware technical stuff?
Oh god, just like things I've
Yeah.
read over years and years and
Okay.
years, and like reading forums and like technical documentation for emulators and hearing people kind of talk about it, and like I know it's kind of bad to attribute a lot of this stuff to like late night Wikipedia binges,
Ah.
but it wasn't even so much that. It was like then also checking the citations and reading what people were saying on like forums where people who were programming emulators were hanging out at the time. And then if I ever see a piece of technical terminology in an emulator, um, let's say that like you have an emulator like Flycast or like damn, I've forgotten what the other Dreamcast emulator is called, but there was one
Flycast
Raycast.
even under development anymore, or Raycast?
Yeah. Flycast definitely is.
Flycast is
But then
back under development. Huh?
the older emulators like Demel and Chancast. Oh my gosh, that was another one. Null DC. Wow, I'm like remembering the names of old emulators here. But there's
See,
one that I've missed. Let me just quickly look
Redream.
at the list of
Redream.
Dreamcast emulators.
I think
Redream.
yeah.
Redream. That's the one that I'm thinking of. Redream. So
I'm not credited, but I was basically the sole beta tester for the ARM Raspberry Pi version.
Oh, nice.
awesome.
Also,
So if there was a piece of technical terminology that I didn't understand from the options that it gives me, I'll Google it and then I'll get distracted, and 4 hours later, suddenly I'll know all of this shit. So that's kind of like where a lot of my technical knowledge for game consoles and things come from. And like there are developers who used to work on the Dreamcast's hardware and the Saturn's hardware and even the Mega Drive and stuff at the time, who now have YouTube channels, and they talk about like what those old dev kits were like to work with and the technical challenges and limitations of working with the systems and what they were good at and bad at. And in the Dreamcast homebrew community, like homebrewers have been porting like decompilations of N64, PS1, and even some like PC and PlayStation 2 games that never got released on the Dreamcast at the time to Dreamcast. And they talk about all of this stuff. They talk about like what the GPU is good at and what it isn't so good at, and why certain games are harder or easier than others, depending on what piece of hardware, what equivalent hardware they were being ported from, and all of the kind of reasons for that. And then
So,
video game magazines and
sorry,
retro
I
gaming
just had
magazines
a
at the time had
thought. I
yeah,
suddenly
go ahead.
remembered my least favorite PS1 game. It's just it was Dragon Ball Z Ultimate Battle 22.
oh god, yeah, that one's bad.
Yeah, like it was so bad. I think I actually threw up just playing it, because like it made me sick. And I remember a friend, bless his soul, he bought it for me as a birthday present. Yeah, yeah. So I wake up and he just holds it over my face like happy birthday, and I was like, ah! I literally backed up on the wall like I Spider-Man up the wall because I was just like, there's like the fucking anime Evangelion kid, which just backs the fuck up. Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
Man.
I think I have a second least. I have several least favorite PS1 games.
But yeah, like I said, I tend to block those bad ones out of my memory.
Yeah, same. I'm not very good at remembering things that I actually do enjoy, let alone the stuff that I don't. But um,
With all the Dreamcast talk, are we going to declare that a fifth generation console now?
absolutely not.
But I will say, at least to you two, if you ever want to emulate it, Redream, if you send like a donation to the developers, they'll give you an HD unlock key because the resolution's locked at like 480 unless you put in the key. So if you want HD, I kept that in my storage. So
I bought it
Yeah.
back in the day.
yeah,
Actually, that's the reason why I ended up selling all of my old video games, because the two things that weren't, to my mind, emulated properly on the Dreamcast were the order independent transparency thing, which makes things like the bubble shields and water surfaces and Sonic Adventure games and things look kind of weird.
yeah.
The other thing was, it's kind of esoteric this, but the sound chip has like a digital signal processing like effects unit in it that does like reverb and chorus and stuff. And there's one game, RPG called Time Stalkers. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to get too much into it.
Dreamcast.
But the music has this like really thick echo effect on it that was never emulated properly. And then Redream added DSP emulation for the sound chip, and I played it. And I played um, Time Stalkers and Jet Set Radio and like a couple of the Sonic games, and I was just like, well, I mean, this is it. This is good enough. I can sell everything now, and so I did. But I did have a code at the time. But to be honest, Flycast, the Flycast core in RetroArch is just as good and gives you just as many options for free, which is kind of handy nowadays.
Yeah,
But
I mean, I guess my problem with RetroArch, I won't get too much into it, but the dev team has a lot of very bigoted allegations against them. And they are as such that it makes me uncomfortable enough using RetroArch outside of platforms that don't have an alternative that I was very willing to, even though I got a free key for doing the Raspberry Pi thing, throw another $6 at the dev team of Redream.
yeah, yeah, I mean, like I found most of those other emulators that I've mentioned before, like long before I got used to just like running RetroArch for most things, and because I live in the UK and libel laws here are pretty strict, I cannot comment on any allegations that are not absolutely confirmed for
I mean,
anyone
I I
for any
I, did,
reason.
I didn't say what they were. I just said
Yep.
that the allegations exist.
And I don't know what they are, and I've never heard of this before, and I can't talk about them even if I knew because of or speculate on them on any kind of recorded media because of where I live. So unfortunately, I'm just gonna have to keep on using RetroArch, I guess. But no, so like
Allegedly, there are allegations.
as as we were on the subject of the Saturn, does anyone have a favorite Saturn game, hidden gems of which there are plenty on this console? It has a really tragic, I guess, backstory and a hidden library because not only is it Sega's best-selling console in Japan, it actually, as I mentioned previously, outsold the N64 in Japan. But of all of Sega's systems, the Saturn has the most games, which not a lot of people know about, but it also has the most games that are region locked and Japan specific, and a lot of them, until fan localization efforts were made to bring them over to the West, untranslated, lost to time, and unplayable. But having discovered a lot of the hidden gems in its library recently, and even having some of the bad localizations fixed by fan teams and modders, the more I play of the Saturn's library, the sadder I feel about what happened to it, because
Yeah.
I think that there is a world in which the Saturn could have at least competed with the N64, if not caught up really substantially to the PS1. I think that system was robbed by pretty abject mismanagement.
Yeah, the
Oh,
botched
yeah.
early launch and allegedly from several sources within Sega of Japan and Sega of America in recent years, based on the Balan Wonderworld, I almost said tragedies.
Fiasco, I think, is more of a
Fiasco is a better word. The wake of Balan Wonderworld had a lot of people, now that he's in prison for things, talking about how terrible Yuji Naka allegedly was to work for, and how during the JRPG boom worldwide, he maintained that RPGs were a fad that would die out, and it was really hard to get RPGs over to the States on the Saturn.
Yeah, and it wasn't helped by Sega of America basically fostering a no JRPGs policy. Like Bernie Stoller, who was the CEO of Sega at the time, reportedly, who was Sega America at the time, reportedly really didn't like the Saturn, and I think he didn't like the fact that he saw himself, I think, as being like lumbered with its failure to launch correctly. And so basically, I mean, he was out really, I think, just before the Dreamcast launched, and even during that handover period, it was mainly the subsequent CEO, whose name escapes me, Peter Moore. Peter Moore,
Yeah.
that's it, that's his name. It was really him that kind of like carried the Dreamcast's launch to the success that it ended up being in the States. But that whole era of the Saturn, from like launch to continuation to eventual discontinuation, was
Yeah.
horrendously mismanaged. Go
I
ahead,
have
sorry.
a segment in our gaming news that we do once a month called Well, I Remember, Don't You? Where Grandpa Slug comes in and just talks about a old, either failed or forgotten console or accessory. Uh, and um, we really discovered that Sega was its own worst enemy. Because I've
Yeah,
covered the Sega Black Belt, which was going to be America's version of the Dreamcast. Um, and then there was a Sega 64X, much like the 32X. They were going to do one again for the next generation, which apparently they got shot down. But yeah, so they're definitely their own worst enemy. Um, uh, and but yeah, let's well, yeah, I can't really think of anything particular to Sega Saturn. I didn't get to spend too much time. I only there's games I saw that I think would be good, or but I never really played personally. And then the rest are basically like, well, there's a Sega CD or a PS1 port of it, so it doesn't really count.
yeah.
Like, oh, there's Sonic R. If you want to count that as good, but I liked
Hey,
it.
I like Sonic R.
Yeah,
I like
Everybody
Sonic 3D Blast as well.
Sonic Racing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Living
So I've
in the
See,
actually met
city,
the
gonna
I,
survive.
I
Dream
have
of life.
I have an unpopular Sonic opinion.
Oh.
uh-huh.
I like 3D Sonic. I don't like 2D Sonic.
Mm.
Understandable. I know lots of people who think and feel that way. And actually, if I see somebody playing 2D Sonic, I can usually tell whether or not they would be a better fit for especially like the earlier 3D Sonic games.
I guess
Um,
it's equal. Like on Sonic Generations, I much prefer the 3D levels, but I think I'm more of a 3D platformer person. But I
yeah.
grew up with the Sonic games, so it's like so I don't. It's like I don't hate it, I just don't mind it. You know. So uh, but
But
yeah,
I actually think that there's this popular narrative or idea or like I don't know fantasy I guess you could call it that if only Sega Technical Institute had been given the time and resources to actually finish Sonic Extreme, and it was no way like there was no risk of Sonic Extreme actually ending
yeah,
up being a completed project. By the way, like the development of
yeah,
that game was so disjointed and disorganized and disastrous that it was basically doomed
yeah.
from the start. Even like from conception onwards, it
So
started and finished in the development hell where it frankly belonged.
yeah,
Every single attempt to
Same.
revive or cobble
Which game
together.
again? I cut out for a sec.
Sonic Extreme.
Sorry.
Yeah, Sonic Extreme.
Yeah, it would.
Yuji Naka like revoking the engine halfway through didn't help either.
Yeah.
But that's again, that's a very small part of the story,
Oh yeah.
and it was only going to be used specifically for the boss fights, the Nights into Dreams rendering technologies and things. Like, I don't think that even if it did reach completion in any of the iterations of it that were presented as candidates for being made into a final product, I don't think that there is a chance that it would have been good or well received. I think it would have been disastrous for the Sonic franchise, and that the Saturn would have fallen flatter on its arse than it did, because no attempt to revive any conceptual part of that game or cobble together anything that they actually had completed at the time, no footage that I've seen, and no like leaked reconstructed betas that I've played through were any good.
Oh
And
yeah.
it was sorry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So
I think the only thing to the Sonic franchise that is as disastrous as it could have been if it had come out
yeah.
is Ken Penders.
Yeah.
Right. And now Sonic yeah, I do feel like it probably would have killed the Sonic franchise there. And it was actually Sonic was one of the main factors on why we got the Dreamcast instead of the Black Belts. Because basically the Sega of America and Japan hardly communicate with each other. So they were developing the Black Belt here for the American team, and it would have possibly been stronger tech than the Dreamcast because one of its main features was that it was going to be able to play more PC ports. So that would have been pretty neat. But then yeah, the head honcho who got to make the final shots, he's already pissed at the American team for basically partially ruining the Saturn because cause they're like, oh, the Saturn's kind of a failure. We're just gonna make a new one anyway. So people are like, why buy a Saturn? And so they kind of sabotaged the Saturn. So he's already pissed at America for that. But the Black Belts tech would not have been able to run the Sonic game they had in development. And they was like, well, we already lost. We didn't have a Sonic game for the Saturn, so I want a Sonic game out for this next generation console. So then they rolled with the Dreamcast.
Yeah. Even the idea that, like, because people talk about the Traveller's Tales Sonic games, so 3D and R,
Yeah.
as if they're not like, as if they weren't like actually pushed as the big current Sonic games of the era. Like, people say, okay, Sonic didn't really have a flagship game on the Saturn. 3D Blast was about as close as you would get to a flagship, and then a pretty mainstream arcade racing type spin-off. Definitely, Sonic R is like legitimate as sort of a major and noteworthy entry into the series, and I can tell you the reason why. It was actually only really the programming that was outsourced to Traveller's Tales. The actual level design, and even in Sonic R, the 3D geometry and modeling for the stages was done by Sonic Team and then sent over to the UK to be like converted to Saturn and imported into the game for the actual release. But like the level design and like general flow and pace of the gameplay, they were as much a product of Sonic Team as they were a product of Traveller's Tales. If you look at the credits and like read interviews and listen to the people who like actually made that game, it's like a shocking amount of them were actual like de facto Sonic Team design, especially Sonic R. And if you look at the credits for who is actually credited with making the levels, you see names like Takashi Iizuka, you see names like Hirokazu Yasuhara, and the other one as well. What's his name? The guy who eventually ended up to direct. ended up as the director of Samba de Amigo, Billy Hatcher, and Sonic 06.
Oh, nice.
Shun Nakamura, that's it. Yeah, Shun Nakamura. So those sort of like now people who are actually leaders of Sonic Team. Like Takashi Iizuka was the head of the Sonic franchise now, and Shun Nakamura still works there. He was just the executive producer on Sonic X Shadow Generations. They were
Nice.
level designers on Sonic 3D and Sonic R. Like those are de facto real legitimate Sonic games, and I
Nice.
don't think it's fair for them to have been categorized as just simple like subcontracted externally developed spin-offs in the way that they have been. But no, if you have like a favorite Saturn game or like a good memory of
So I
it or
unfortunately
emulating,
cannot. Um,
I
yeah,
only started emulating Saturn recently,
yeah. I
but I can tell you I have a clear favorite couple of games so far.
go ahead, go ahead.
One of them is and is a fan translation, right down to an incredibly competent fan dub. Bulk
Oh, I know
Slash.
what it is.
Bulk Slash.
It's Bulk Slash. Yes,
It's
one of the
so
most
good.
yeah, I know it's great, isn't it? One of the most ambitious fan translations ever done, and the English dub is spectacular. It is so authentic to how like anime and video game English dubs of the era tended to be done. No, that's a
Except like
fantastic
the
pick.
voice acting is good.
Hmm.
I say this as someone who has a lot of love in his heart for incompetent 90s dubs. Bulk Slash is what I wish they sounded like. I've also played the first like hour of Panzer Dragoon Saga, and it's really cool so far.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Uh,
And like so it's like cause Saturn's the one Sega console I haven't had a chance to deep dive into. And I just don't have the time. But cause I done with the Sega CD, the Dreamcast, and the PlayStations and Nintendos, but I didn't make time for the Saturn, unfortunately.
I I've got a couple of favorites on it.
can I name off
My
one favorite?
sorry.
Can I name off one last favorite?
Uh-huh. So my
It's okay.
well, you want to name off the last one? Yeah, no, go ahead, go ahead.
Um, incredibly forward-thinking design for a first-person dungeon crawler. And if you know Camelot as a development team, you'll probably like it. Shining the Holy Ark.
Yeah, one of the Shining Dungeon crawler type games. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool.
it's
That's really cool.
really good.
I remember Shining Force 3 was very well renowned as a tactical RPG, but Holy Ark is one that I haven't experienced myself. Is it sort of the same lineage as like Shining in the Darkness on the Mega Drive, or?
Kind of the same lineage, but Shining in the Darkness all took place in one dungeon, right?
I don't have a great memory of it, I'm afraid.
Because Shining the Holy Ark is like basically plays out like a trad RPG, but from a first-person dungeon crawler perspective, even in captains.
And so, as for tactical RPGs, there's the iconic and tragically unlocalized franchise that actually was, I'm going to say, almost more recognizable as one of Sega's flagships in Japan than even Sonic was during the 90s on the Saturn. Sakura Wars. Sakura Wars is absolutely
Oh yeah.
like era defining, but something that was never really seen outside of Japan. I won't delve too much into that, but it's a visual novel dating simulator tactical RPG mech fighting game where you play as theatrical mech pilots. So when I say theatrical, they have a theater performing troupe, and the theater in which they perform like stage musicals and stuff is kind of a front for their military operations. But they're also shrine maidens, and they have magical powers too. And they fight against evil demon monsters in a kind of post steampunk Meiji Reform era uh, kind of reimagining of Japanese society at the time. It's incredible. If you ever get a chance to listen to the soundtrack and watch some of the like animated cutscenes and see people talk about the characters. It's a fantastic series. There was recently a modernized sequel to it called Shin Sakura Wars or New Sakura Wars that was released on the PlayStation 4 in 2019, developed by Sonic Team. Not credited to Sonic Team, but if you look at the credits, it's like, oh yeah, this is just unmasked Scooby-Doo villain. Captain Sonic Team! And I
Yeah.
would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for you meddling video game journalists. No, exactly. So,
I did play a Sakura Wars game once.
Yeah.
On PS2, Sakura Wars So Long, My Love.
that's the fifth one. Yeah, that was one of the few that did get localized eventually.
Everyone said, like, that's the one no one likes, actually. That's why you didn't like it. But I think it was the dub job that made me not like it.
See.
Specifically because the like obligatory little girl character was this weird Mexican caricature.
Right. I've not played So Long My Love, unfortunately, but I know that it's set in the Americas.
It's like New York, and I forget her name. I might try it again at some point, see if I was being unfair.
There was a Wii version, and funnily enough,
Yeah.
as this was the one Sakura Wars game that got localized, the Wii version actually only came out in the US and Europe, which is sort of insane. But sorry, as for like other Saturn games, and I'll try and be quick with these. My favorite probably of all time, and my second favorite video game of all time, and the reason why I ended up trying to learn so much about the members and works of Sonic Team of the era is Nights into Dreams.
Mm.
I
That's a
love
game.
Nights.
That's a game I can definitely see the appeal of, and I tried really hard to like, but it ended up one of those games that I appreciate more than I like playing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I
understandable.
kind of same. Although I really much preferred the game that came out on Wii. Yeah, Journey on the Dreams. What? Any more Saturns?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about Nights for a couple of seconds. Nights is definitely not for everybody. When I played it, it was so weird because I played the 2012 PC port, and when I first got a feel for it and kind of a grip of the gameplay, immediately just from the first few seconds of playing it, I understood that like the gameplay actually takes place on a 2D plane, and the 360-degree movement of the flying, and the way that it's organized into loops each stage is organized into loops that you have to go around, and like collecting the 20 blue gems to unlock the Idia capture and then take the Idia back to the start line. But the bit that you're judged on for time is how quickly you collect the 20 blue gems and then break the Idia capture. After that, you don't actually have to go back to the beginning of the loop to reset it and go to the next section of the track. Um, because the time bonus is effectively banked when you break the capture. So you can actually just use the rest of your time that you have in that stage to do multiple laps of whatever part of the loop you're in, and rack up like a really high score and get like loads of combos and things. So it's a kind of combination between a time attack game and a score attack game. It's just really like ingenious piece of arcade design, and I understood it implicitly and intrinsically upon just first playing it with almost no context or explanation whatsoever. I just got Nights into Dreams. I describe the experience as like it's almost like I was remembering memories from a past life. Is what it felt like to me. I was like, oh yes, Nights into Dreams, the game that I somehow implicitly and intrinsically already understand how to play and everything about, and it was the most natural thing in the world for me. It just clicked just right from the jump. Whereas I've seen streamers play Nights into Dreams for the first time, and they just don't get it at all. They were like, "Oh, I thought this was a 3D game. Oh, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? What are these blue chips I'm supposed to collect? What are the hoops? What does Link mean? How do I I got back to the beginning of the loop. Surely it's supposed to go on to the next part on its own. Why is there a little icon in the corner of the screen telling me that there's an item that I need to collect or destroy? They just didn't get it at all. And even if they ended up actually passing the stage and not running out of time, getting caught by the alarm clock and then dying, they would make it to the last level and it wouldn't unlock. And it's like, well, no, you need C ranks at least in every single stage to unlock the big final level. And they hadn't really like worked out the scoring system in the game well enough to be able to actually unlock it. Like I've seen people really hate it and not get along with it. And watching them, people who don't understand knights, play that game and fail at it, it reminds me of my own experience playing modern competitive games like first-person shooters and stuff like Valorant. Like the experience of me playing Valorant for the first time was like watching people who don't understand Nights into Dreams play Nights for the first
Yeah.
time. It was really, really strange to have like a game that I get and be able to contrast it with more modern, like readily accepted game design tropes that I like never vibed with and don't understand. And I'm like, oh right, okay. Now I guess they know how I feel.
Oh man. Now let's go off road here to the Nintendo Game Boy Color. That was a 5th gen.
Oh, we're doing handheld games as well, huh?
Yeah.
Nice.
We'll go to because now we've gone really long, but yeah, let's just talk in general because the Game Boy Color now I'd say yeah, probably Game Boy Advance definitely where I had my most experience, but the Color we all have somehow this monochrome simple little brick just beat everything that had color and lighting and stuff. Like Nintendo weren't even scared, when you heard like about this like Game Gear and whatnot.
I can tell you exactly why.
Go on.
Battery life.
Yep.
Game Boy, modern batteries, functional DMG model Game Boy will last like 48 hours.
Yeah.
Batteries, then it would last 14 to 60. Meanwhile, the Game Gear and the Atari Lynx, the backlit in color,
Yeah.
objectively, technically better handheld consoles before the Game Boy Color was even in color. And even after the Game Boy Color, they still looked better. Lasted about 4 hours on 4 to 8 AA's.
Yeah.
And then the Color came along, brought up about color technology, and so now our 8-bit sprites were just that guy like more shades of color, and it was just it was neat. But the games were still of really good quality. And like especially like Pokemon was birthed on that, and yeah, had a couple of RPGs.
Pokemon Crystal was probably my favorite Game Boy Color game.
Pokemon, which one?
Pokemon Crystal. Or Link's Awakening DX. I'm incredibly predictable on the Game Boy Color.
Nice.
Well, there weren't that many Game Boy Color exclusive games, right? Because it's sort of in hindsight, you could say that it was almost like a stopgap between, well, how dated the original Game Boy hardware was. Although it had been sort of like shrunk into the Game Boy Pocket, which is the one that I had at the time. I inherited a Game Boy Pocket from a sibling of mine. But the color, to be honest, I was happy just waiting for the Advance. And even then, it took me so long to save up for a Game Boy Advance that the DS was already out. So I kind of skipped the color generation entirely because the DS was back compatible with the Game Boy Advance, but it wasn't back compatible with the color and original Game Boy. So I kept my Game Boy Pocket and played all the DMG black and white games. And I had a DS with Game Boy Advance functionality, but actual exclusive Game Boy Color games, that's kind of a complete blind spot for me. And having played some of them in emulators, I'm not a big fan of Wario Land. I remember like Wario Land 3 was a thing.
Oh, that's popular.
And then Pokemon Gen 2, never touched it. 1 and 3, yeah, but Gen 2, unfortunately, like again,
Dang,
total blind spot.
that one's a favorite of everyone's.
Gen 2, like, I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because I'm probably going to have to hop off soon.
Yeah.
I'm getting tired and having stomach distress. But
That's fine.
Pokemon Gen 2 is one of those things that, like every Pokemon generation, is getting like hindsighted to death. I grew up in the middle of Pokemon mania,
Yeah, I remember when it started.
and like people are talking about how everyone hated Gen 2 because of its disappointing endgame. And I'm like,
Bullshit.
no, that's not true. Like I remember the fact that it had a post game
Like I was
being
there.
considered revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
Like hell, even Pokemon Gen 1 having something after the game was like Morrowind didn't come out till 2001. That's the
Yeah.
only game I can think of at the time that continued after the game.
But
So 2008.
also the Game Boy Pocket did have improved battery life as well, so that was nice.
Yep.
Oh yeah, the Game Boy Pocket's battery life was excellent. It was even better than the original and the color actually, and it was AAA batteries and very slim. I loved my Game Boy Pocket. I'm just trying to see. Yeah. Okay. So now I have a slightly different time scale, like memory time scale of Pokemon from my perspective, because you got to remember I grew up in the UK, so uh,
Yeah.
in Europe we got Pokemon, basically everything Pokemon up until third gen, about a year later than the US did, and in a very truncated time span.
Yeah.
So within months of within months of each other, the games were kind of coming out and very quickly being replaced. The VHS copy of uh, Pokemon the first movie I had this sizzle reel at the beginning where it was like it had trailers for Pokemon Red and Blue, trailers for the simultaneously released with the movie Yellow Special Pikachu Edition. It had Pinball, Snap, Pokemon Stadium on the N64, the Pokemon Trading Card game, Game Boy game, and previews for the then upcoming Generation 2. But having lived through that era, it was basically non-stop Pokemania excitement from I'm going to say it was like 1999 to about 2000 2002, 2003, something like that. I cannot remember, unfortunately, when Gen 3 was released here, but I think uh, it must have been something like 2003.
See, Gen 3 didn't get the same level of hype that Gen 2 did, but
That was the fall off, definitely for my mind at least. It was when the first trilogy of movies had come out, and even the third one was starting to kind of like
see, it,
fumble a
it
little.
it's also not the fall off that people perceive. It's just like, malls stopped being a thing, so there's no longer, like, even if there were still carrying your Pokemon games everywhere, malls stopped being a thing, so there's no longer Pokemon pavilions at your mall where you can shove your Game Boy in a fucking picnic table and trade with someone else on the other side of the picnic table.
You see,
Like,
I never really had that much experience of that side of Pokemon culture because I grew up in the countryside, but I remember this is a really like a vivid memory. I was only about 3 years old at the time, but I remember the run up to Christmas 1999, um, going to Hamleys, which is the largest toy store in London. So it's one of the biggest toy and most renowned toy stores in the UK. And I remember going there, and there was an entire it felt like it was an entire floor and certainly a massive display, like a big corner of the shop that was just dedicated to Pokemon plushies, toys, memorabilia, collaborations with other brands. You could buy these little sort of like Polly Pocket style environments that you could like connect to each other and play with these little Pokemon mini toys and things. There were free toys coming out with like fast food products back then, and I remember walking through this toy store, and there would be these little Pikachu plushies, and you would squeeze its hand, and it would sing the "Gotta catch 'em all" from the
Nice.
theme song. And I remember you couldn't go more than a couple of steps without hearing that little jingle. Like modern kids and teenagers, and even people who were like born in the mid 2000s, who are like in their 20s and stuff now, they don't quite get just how massive and how much of a cultural explosion Pokemania was at the time.
Yeah.
And it's almost difficult to overstate just how impactful it was. Like, I used to go to the library and I used to borrow VHS tapes of the Pokemon anime, because none of the TV channels that I had were like airing the current seasons and things.
Like, it's genuinely not inaccurate to say that the source of the anime boom outside of Japan is a combination of Pokemon and Cartoon Network's Toonami.
Yeah, definitely.
Like,
in the UK, it was Fox Kids, Jetix, and well, if we have any UK listeners, then yeah,
See,
those two channels.
Jetix is, at least in the States, something that cropped up in response to Toonami. Which Toonami ending on Cartoon Network was, at least as a daytime thing, and now it's some edgy Adult Swim-esque crap, but with anime instead, on a dying network that mostly just reruns Teen Titans Go.
Right.
Like, my experience with Pokemon was mostly the games. Like,
Right.
I was a quote-unquote competitive player in the era where competitive was building up a team of your favorites and playing with other kids at the mall.
Yeah.
And, like, I think even people who grew up among it are prone to being disingenuous, because, like, I've heard Steph Sterling say that no one owned a link cable. They expected you to buy 2 Game Boys and a copy of each game. That's why they came in double packs. And I'm like,
Okay, so in the
I never saw
UK,
those, man.
that's more true than it was in the US.
Oh,
yeah, but I
Having
mean,
grown up at the time, I like personal recall of that kind of era. I knew
Yeah,
basically
yep.
nobody, or virtually nobody, who actually used the link cable.
I get it, but also the intent of the double packs was not to make you buy 2 Game Boys and a copy of each game. That's like an accusation that's nonsensical. Siblings are a thing that exists.
Yeah, exactly. It was definitely for siblings, for sure.
Like, it's not, this isn't something that happened. That was definitely not the intent.
I got
But game pundits in general are just kind of prone to looking at the worst outcome of everything and accusing it of being the intent.
yeah. I got a Pokemania story. So there was this time where, like, when Pokemon was blowing up, and they had these Pokemon watches. They're like Tamagotchi watches.
Sea Watcher?
Yeah, where you basically have your like, little anime Pikachu, Squirtle, or
Yep.
Charmander.
Yep.
And we was at the Toys R Us, and me and a kid just like spotted like the last Pokewatch on the shelf on the far end of the aisle. And it was literally just a scene of a fucking movie. We're just kind of looking at each other, and then we both just started sprinting. And that slow motions, dun, 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 dun. It was felt like it was going in slow motion. It just took like felt just forever. And slow motion, I felt him like literally just shove me to the side, and as I just hit the shelf and go down, like toys is falling on me. And as he's trying to now get a lead, I pick up one of these action figures and I just whip it at him and nail him in the back of the head. He goes down, and so I'm back up and back in the race. And unfortunately, by the time I catch up to where he fell, he's already back on his feet. So now we're at finally at the dead end of the sprint, and we literally, it's just the watch itself was on the bottom shelf, so we literally both did the fucking baseball dive for it, arms reached out, but his hand grabbed it. Like, ah! Oh, yeah. But that was a
Yeah.
fucking memory.
I don't think Pokemon has had the fall off people think it has because it's
No.
still like the most profitable franchise in existence right now.
Yeah.
Yup, of all time too. I literally like. This is something that again, it's something that younger generations don't understand how big it started out, and older generations like boomers and stuff don't understand it as a generational phenomenon as well,
Yep.
because like people who grew up in the 90s and who were Gen 1ers, like people my age, they're getting married and having kids, and their kids are still carrying around backpacks and water bottles and toys and games that have like Charmander and Pikachu and all of these like classic Gen 1 Pokemon designs. And I'm thinking, like, I can tell it means that I can communicate
Yep.
with generations who are far, far younger than me. I can tell them amazing stories, and they look at me like I'm this sage-like elder recounting legendary ancient mythology of like an old battle or war or something when I talk about how Pokemon changed like our lives when we were kids. What brought it back for me? Because I fell out of sync with Pokemon for a really long time
We
because
all have.
wasn't really sorry.
So we all have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
As an aside, I'm out of sync with like modern Pokemon,
yeah.
but I still play ROM hacks and fan games and stuff.
But like contemporary Pokemon
Yep.
while releases was still coming out during my like late childhood and teenage years and things. What brought me back to it was in 2016 Pokemon Go.
Yep.
And I don't know what it was, but like playing it and seeing this like augmented reality game and then looking up videos of like the soundtrack and rewatching some of the earlier episodes of the anime and the movies and stuff, I had this sudden rush of like, I am not a very nostalgic person, and I barely remember large chunks of my childhood, and certainly not like the emotions attached to it. And so this
Yep.
doesn't happen to me. But Pokemon Go, replaying it and getting back into that world again, awakened a similar sort of like, oh, memory of a parallel universe effect that I had while playing Nights into Dreams, but like with Pokemon. I felt so like deeply personally connected to it. And I thought, you know what? Even though I'm like 21 now and this is 2016 and I'm an adult, when I grow up, I want to be a fucking Pokemon trainer. And so I would be going to like the industrial estate in the university town where I was living at the time in the dead of night to catch like Grimer and Ghastly and stuff. And I'm like walking around in public with my headphones on with my fucking phone out in front of me thinking like, dude, I'm gonna get this shit stolen, bro. I'm gonna get mugged right now. I am so lucky that I am where I am in the country and that it's like this fucking safe. That I'm out at 3 o'clock in the morning in an abandoned parking lot next to an old like steelworks catching muck and coughing and wheezing. I'm thinking, yeah, maybe this isn't like the best idea, but it feels so cool. I walked so much that summer. Um, and it actually did what Pokemon was sort of legendarily always supposed to do, which is get people out and
Yep.
socializing and talking and sharing stories about where they caught the Pokemon that they did and trading and being part of this culture with each other socially. And Pokemon Go did that again. And I don't think that wave of popularity that, especially considering like the Nintendo Switch came out the following year and it propelled Nintendo's hardware back to mainstream success again,
Yep.
and the subsequent Pokemon games that have come out, although not necessarily super consistent in terms of like objective quality, especially if you ask hardcore fans, but Pokemon is back at the center of the discussion, and the Pokemon Horizons like anime TV series reboot has been phenomenal.
See, I have been called a Gen 9 apologist. And because of Pal World, people have asked me, "Oh, how's Pokemon's dick taste and whatever?" But I will just casually say, yeah, if you get past the technical issues, Gen 9 has some really mature storytelling. Unfortunately, the technical issues.
And
Yeah,
also,
actually
like,
does.
that sounds like a symptom of really like toxic fanboy culture, and
Yeah.
fanboy culture is something that I've just like I have absolutely no time for it. If someone
I lucked
go ahead,
out.
sorry.
I waited till it was like a year or two out already, so most of that shit was ironed out. And so
Yeah.
when I did get play around to it, the community was just happy to see me or something. Like, hey, here, have a shiny, have some stuff.
Yep.
Like, thank you, okay, yeah. It's just like
What-
you like you had shiny Umbreon, like yeah, that's fine. And
When I was still actively streaming, both Legends Arceus and Scarlet Violet and the DLC pass were gifts from a viewer.
nice.
Um, and I streamed them both for a while, but like I still emulate Scarlet Violet because God, the fucking frame rate on a real Switch makes me nauseous now. But emulating it on, say, God, I forget what the emulator's called, Ryujin X something.
Yeah.
It's a work.
I think so, yeah.
Emulating it on that, solid 30 frames per second. The frame rate was the worst technical issue that actually existed. Like when I bring up the fact that, man, you were in the Discord, you saw them posting a guide to add new glitches in, God, what was it called? Yuzu, and message Nintendo with them directly, and here's how you make it look like real footage, and you're just pretending that's not a thing. Like, people were doing some wacky shit around Gen 9, and I wanted no part of any of it.
Yeah, no. I mean, it just sounds like a lot of drama, to be honest.
Yeah, culture wars. And I mean, like from the one side of the audience, I mean the audience with the companies. That's a whole podcast talk itself. And since Bear Bud Bear's kind of winding down, I honestly there's enough here in fifth gen for a second episode. Even if it's like an hour, because there's still like 13 other consoles and handhelds that I can at least like talk about it for a minute or two. Yeah, like but I'll just rattle off. But yeah, the Gamecom, the Casio Loopy, Apple Bandai Pippin.
The Gamecom only has more games than I have brain cells if I've drank half a bottle of bourbon.
Yeah, the Pocket Station. What the hell was the Pladia? The Genesis Nomad, the Neo Geo Pocket, the Amiga CD32, the PC FX, the Virtual Boy. Is my Virtual Boy summer camp story, or should I save that?
Save that for the next episode.
Yeah. I believe I told you, Bear, but then there's the 3DO and the Atari Jaguar, which, yeah, toot my own horn. I think I'm the only person that I know of that actually got a Jaguar City to work.
I can tell you the best game on the Atari Jaguar.
Aside from like internet reviewers, what's that?
Tempest 2000.
Oh, I thought you say Thunder in Paradise, the Hulk Hogan game. But
thing.
Yeah, it's on. I think it's on the Jaguar CD. You know, the hardest to get work finding system ever. But yeah,
I'd like to keep Captain Jack, Brother Dude, and Lieutenant Dan out of this, actually.
yeah. But yeah, because I actually figured out like one of the major flaws of why the CD didn't work. What's that?
I'm interested.
Yeah, because we all call the AVG episode where he couldn't get the run whatsoever because like at least it was connection issues. And it could have been that too because I found two other fatal flaws behind the Jaguar CD. One, the disc tray lid, it actually crushes the disc. It won't spin.
Oh, jeez.
I took a little piece of packing foam and stuck it in there, and that actually got it to work. And so I was able to play some games. You know, thank you, Hulk Hogan, for that wonderful experience. So, but after after so long, the game eventually burnt out after like a couple weeks, and just died altogether. So, and then so that's when I decided to open up, and I discovered now in console hardware there's a thing called a heat sink. Which you want to put usually around the center to suck up the heat from all your circuits and your microchips and whatnot. The heat
Yep.
sink is on like in the back far corner, not sucking up, or it's not sucking up any of the heat. So yeah, basically, this Jaguar's inner hardware is just microwaving itself.
So, can I make a recommendation on where people could find 32X info?
Go for it.
So there's a YouTuber I watch who played every 32X game and ranked them on a fuck, marry, kill system.
Yeah,
Jason Graves.
nice. And I played them all. I played them all myself, because there's only 32 games. So
Yeah.
there's actually a Lobo game prototype that's actually pretty decent.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, the
but yeah.
32X for me starts and ends with okay, some of the fairly, actually for the time, quite decent arcade ports of games like Afterburner and Space Harrier, but
Yeah.
my main draw for the 32X is probably Knuckles Chaotix.
Hell yeah. And we'll go into detail on the next episode. We're going to talk about the I guess we'll say the leftovers of the 5th generation. And then as we go down the road, we'll go through the various libraries. And since we kind of brought it up, the PS1 has so many games that we can probably make a best and worst of PS1 episodes. So
we should also do a Dreamcast thing as like a tweener, because it might be a 6th generation console,
yeah,
but it feels like a bridge between 5th and 6th generation.
yeah. I mean, you could argue that with the Switch/Wii U, but also the Dreamcast, it also does in my Virtual Boy camping story, it actually comes into that story.
Amazing.
Should I tell it
Yeah,
anyway?
because the Dreamcast had sort of like a lot of ports of cross-gen games, so it had like the best versions of the games released for previous generation systems, like Rayman 2, but then also like games that would later receive technically inferior ports to other systems later on, like Dead or Alive 2. So like it's the only system in which you can get like the best version of Rayman 2 and also the best version of Dead or Alive 2 as well. And even though they kind of hail from different eras of time, the world, and like development process and culture, I guess, the Dreamcast kind of collects a lot of the best snapshots of the wider gaming industry of the era into one, really only like, people say that it was 3 or 4 years from like 1998 to 2001, but in reality we're talking about like the year 2000 and maybe 6 months either side of it, kind of thing, right? Like it's not a tremendously long time that it had,
And the
yet it
Dreamcast
still managed.
also, sorry,
Sorry.
the Dreamcast also has like the only, I want to say, completely functional version of one of the most formative RPGs of my life that I need to go back and beat.
Which is
Grandia 2.
Okay.
Oh, Grandia
Grandia
2.
2.
Now, I was going to talk about the original Grandia on the Saturn, actually, because it was a Saturn exclusive.
Oh.
And then Sega America refused to have it localized, so they made a technically inferior port of it to the PS1, and then that got an international localization. The funny thing is, the same thing happened with Thunder Force 5, and I know a couple of other Sega Saturn games as well that were like Saturn exclusives, only in Japan. Then localization for them was explicitly refused, so they had to be ported to the PS1 and then localized internationally on the PS1 as like slightly inferior like reversionings and ports of the same games. And they were successful on the PS1. So I think it kind of goes to show that like the Saturn could have been great had they just brought more games from it over to the West.
I agree.
I agree. I do want to say that like
Grandia 1 like kind of cemented a problem I have with child protagonists.
Yeah.
Because God, what's his name? Justin? He's like 10. He's too young for this shit.
Oh yeah, but Ash Ketchum from Pokemon is 10 as well.
Yeah, but like I was 10 when I was watching Ash Ketchum.
But yeah, because the point is, like, the Saturn was not a bad console; it was just a failure. Yeah.
Yep. And I attribute, at least from living through that era, I attribute a lot of that to the botched launch.
Yeah. Oh man. But okay.
Which Sony repeated for the PS3. $599 US.
And
But then, of
yeah,
course-
yeah, it's interesting. We probably will have a Sega Saturn episode.
Hell,
It's
I
fun.
could go on at length about how much I fucking love Bulk Slash.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I guess the big difference between the Saturn and Dreamcast failure and the failure of any console in the PlayStation series is that Sony has an obvious and explicit advantage that Sega never enjoyed, and that is that they were always an international tech mega conglomerate. And so they had kind of unlimited money to throw at these things until they stuck and worked. And really, the only traditional video game company that survived the kind of influx of like large tech technology corporations into the video gaming space was Nintendo. Everyone else who had a console, NEC, SNK, basically any other big Japanese developer that you can think of. A lot of them ended up having to like merge together with other companies, like the Faustian bargain that Sega took, getting bought out by a pachinko company named Sammy in 2004 is kind of legendary. But then think about it this way: a lot of big Japanese companies who were making video games, really successful ones during the 80s and 90s, ended up in mergers. Square Enix, Bandai Namco, Sega Sammy, Nintendo. Well, Koei Tecmo, that's another one. Nintendo are pretty much the only large gaming dedicated group that ended up completely, I'm going to use the term, unmolested by mergers and acquisitions in that sense.
I think I'm going to make this my closing comment and head off, because I'm not going to reveal her name or her pen name or whatever. But one of my friends who works in, we'll call it freelance manga in Japan. She did some contractor work for Sega in the 2000s. And she says to me one day over voice chat, "We know Sega's not a Zaibatsu because Yuji Naka still has both his pinkies."
Right. And that's funny, is that there were board members in the 90s at Sega who didn't.
Yeah. So we know that they were out of that game by the time Yuji Naka did his thing in the, because he still does.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, Dallas, thank you all for listening on this episode of the Waifu Tavern Frequency. We're just a bunch of us gamers just shooting the shit. All right, and what do y'all remember about the 5th generation? Yeah, leave a comments. All right, and what else you want us to talk about? We'll see y'all next time.
If we can, like, I guess, I don't know. I don't know if you have anything to plug, Bud.
Oh, go ahead and plug. Yeah, we'll do your plugs.
I do have a plug, actually. If it's okay if I plug my stupid little blog.
Oh, go for it.
Because I don't stream anymore, but let me pull up the thing to have Tilly link it here. I do a media analysis blog using a lot of my old VTuber lore and assets called Time Diver Media Analysis that I'm shoving in the Discord now for Tilly to link. Basically, I just look at shit I find interesting and I write about it. So far, I've completed my look at the Dreamcast RPG duology that later got hacked up into one GameCube game, Evolution.
Evolution?
Yes, I have a
okay.
complete documentation of my playthrough and opinions of Evolution, the World of Sacred Device, and
No
Evolution 2,
way!
Far Off Promise, which I compare Far Off Promise to Phantasy Star Portable 2 Infinite, which is strange. My latest posting is called Sword Art Offline, How Not to Do It. And it's a long-winded diatribe about my problems with Sword Art Online. And how, it could be fixed. I've got some posts about MMORPGs, but yeah, I started with a Dreamcast RPG duology.
Fantastic.
I
I
love this
genuinely,
Evolution.
I do not expect ever to hear about Evolution, the World of Sacred Device in the wild. That was a formative childhood game for me, and finding anyone else who has played it, let alone sort of has any kind of expertise on it, is super rare. So
Oh, I owned it.
I'll be checking that out.
I wouldn't call it expertise. Like, my post on World of Sacred Device is very much, there's not a lot here, but what's here is good, is kind of my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know whether or not you ever saw. I think his name is something hero. Ah, damn! There was a video that was
Manly
done
Badass
recently on.
Hero?
Sorry.
Manly Badass Hero?
No, no. It was a retrospective on Evolution that a YouTuber that I saw really recently did, and it was fantastic. And I cannot remember the YouTuber's name. I think it was something like Highbit Hero.
Oh,
Um,
sounds familiar.
no,
Yeah, I
I'll
think
I'll
it's
I'll have
actually.
to find it here.
What got me into looking at Evolution was looking through Dreamcast ISO sets after essentially getting my key for Redream for testing the Raspberry Pi version,
Nice.
and then finding out that Evolution Worlds on GameCube was two games butchered into one game.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, Hyperbit Hero. It was Hyperbit Hero who did a
Hyperbit
great
Hero. I will,
video on Evolution.
I will watch that while I'm winding down for bed tonight.
Alright, tell the
Awesome.
missus I said hi.
I
And
will.
I will plug all of my last couple of socials and things. I'm Shannon. I'm a retro variety VTuber. As I may have mentioned earlier, I stream on Twitch. I have various different social media outlets on microblogging platforms like Blue Sky and Tumblr. You can find my website at shinnon.moe, so that is SHINON.MOE. Alternatively, twitch.tv/Shinnon_SHN. So that is SHINON_SHN, and that is usually the tag and handle under which I'm available on whatever relevant social media platform that you are using. So I am on basically all of them in some form or another, although I prefer Twitch. I do have a YouTube channel as well where my Twitch VODs go. And for microblogging and regular posting and discussion and stuff, Tumblr and Blue Sky. Yeah, thank you for listening and thank you for having me, Tilly. And it was lovely to meet you, Bear, as well.
It was lovely to meet you too. And I'm here. I'm queer. My joint pain is moderate to severe.
Alright, well, if you're watching this, you already know me. I'm TavernTilly. How's it going? I mostly stream on Twitch, and I also stream some not-for-safe work games on Joystick TV. And depending on when this comes out, I might also have a Patreon. Oh, here I go. And I have a couple YouTube channels. Echo? Oh, it's not bad. This is. Anyways, but yeah, y'all have a good night. Love you.